Well, after Game 7 of last year's Eastern Conference Finals, Jimmy Butler told everyone that they'd be back in the same situation and they would get it done. The Miami Heat are men of their word and are officially going to the finals all the way from the 8th seed and the play-in. Joining us to break it all down is NBA Hype host, Coach Charles Chu. Charles, it's great to have you back.
Thank you. Glad to be back and be with you here again.
I know, it feels like a throwback in so many ways, but let's focus here on what happened in Game 7. So the Boston Celtics, with all the momentum, it felt like it was one-way traffic from Games 4, 5, 6, and 7. It felt like Boston had the opportunity. It was a home court advantage, raucous crowd to start out with, but the Miami Heat silenced them. What did you make of Game 7?
Well, one positive I saw heading into Game 7 was Jimmy Butler basically guaranteed a win. And, this guy meant business. The only reason why I kind of felt Miami might be able to pull it through was it's not easy to win 4 games in a row in any series. I mean, that's why we don't see that many sweeps. And with a coach like Coach Spo, you figure he'd make the right adjustments. Now, the reason why I was worried for the Heat was because, well, the Celtics winning a game like that in the home court of the opposing team, that's just deflating. And Miami could have easily folded, but hey, I mean, they hit their shots and the Celtics couldn't buy a bucket in this game.
It was the way that they started, rather the way that Game 6 ended, that people thought, all right, maybe the start of Game 7 will tell a lot of things. To be fair, Jason Tatum did get hurt in the very first play of the game, tweaked his ankle, but it really wasn't the reason why they lost this one. They ended up losing by 20 or so points. Why do you think the Miami Heat came out and just basically slapped them offensively? Talking about the Boston Celtics.
Well, I think the Celtics really struggle when they're not in transition. I mean, they're a great transition team, but when the defense in the game kind of slows down in half court, that's where their challenges are. And then you have Tatum, who, as you said, got hurt. Didn't really have the same lift or elevation that he usually had. Their half-court offense just really was stifled. Not to mention the fact that they couldn't hit threes. While the Heat on the flip side, I mean, they hit, 50% from 3.
Yeah.
They were making everything. Martin was great. Everybody. The Heat basically used 7 players in this game, and everybody chipped in. And, I think that was basically the difference in the game.
We were talking a bit about defense right before we went on air, and we both came up with the same conclusion. How can a team run zone defense in an NBA playoff series and pull it off over and over again? You have to give credit to Coach Eric Spoelstra here. So take a look at the zone defense here of the Miami Heat. Is there anything that makes it special, makes it different, that gave a high-octane team like the Boston Celtics so much trouble?
Well, one thing they have are guys who are dogs on defense. You got Jimmy Butler, Adebayo, Kyle Lowry, and then they also have some length in their wings. But I think the most important thing with a zone is you got to have guys that buy into it. And the Heat clearly have bought into their zone. I mean, it's a bit of a matchup zone, a funky zone, but it just fits into the tendencies and the scouting report of how they want to defend the opposing players. And the way they put it all together is just great. I mean, you don't see many teams really struggle against the zone. You'd expect at such a high level the NBA teams would be able to make the right adjustments, the right counters. But again, in that zone, I mean, they wanted to give up the 3-ball, and the 3-ball just deserted Boston in this game. And actually for the series, to be honest, Tatum and Brown really struggled from the outside. They didn't shoot well, and that was probably a big factor why Miami was able to get past them.
Well, talking about big factors of how Miami were able to get past Boston, we have to give credit to some of the individual performers. Jimmy Butler won the award for Series MVP, Eastern Conference Finals MVP, but it was a close vote. Amongst the 9 voting members of the press, there were 5 who voted for Jimmy Butler. The other 4 went to Caleb Martin. Caleb Martin, obviously with a breakout campaign here in the playoffs for the Miami Heat. And do you think that this was a bit contentious in terms of this decision?
Well, I think Caleb Martin was just great. I mean, anytime you shoot above 50% from 3, I mean, that's just an excellent number. And to hit that many
60.2% from 3.
Exactly, right? And where did he come from, man? This guy even played in the G League. So that's why I gave so much more respect to Coach Spo. Because, man, you look at these guys, they're so unheralded, a bunch of second-round picks. I mean, no big names really except for Jimmy Butler and Bam. And then to get them to play this well at this level is great. But going back to your point, I thought Martin was excellent. He's playing so much better in this conference finals than he did in the regular season. 19 points, rebounding well, and he's just been, he just made big shot after big shot whenever the Heat needed him. Of course, Butler was great the first 2 games, but he was up and down. I think Martin was overall the more consistent player in the series.
So the Boston Celtics had a 3% chance of winning the Eastern Conference Finals before the playoffs. In fact, they lost their first play-in game, and all of a sudden, they're marching on to the finals. Now, right before we move on to a really quick finals preview, Boston Celtics, a lot of people are going to ask, where do they go from here? They were favored to win this one. They were favored to make it all the way to the finals at the very least. Where do they go from here? Do things need to change? Does coaching need to change? What's the solution?
I wouldn't put it on the coaching just yet. Obviously, as a first-year coach, he has a lot to learn. I mean, he's changed. He admits that at times he may have lost the locker room or whatever, however you want to interpret that. I mean, I think he's taken responsibility for that. But you got to look things and put things in perspective. I mean, Jason Tatum's 24 years old, man. I mean, LeBron, MJ, all these guys, Steph, they won their first ring at 27. So they're still young. I thought Jason Tatum could have played better also at times. I mean, obviously he had a great explosion in Game 7 the previous series, but there are also games in the playoffs that he hasn't lived up to the moment. Jaylen Brown looks like a great tandem with him, but again, he also struggled this series. But they also weren't that healthy. Brogdon was hurt, basically. Robert Williams was hurt at times, didn't play like themselves. So, I still think this core has what it takes to maybe win a championship one day, especially if they are able to keep things together. Maybe just add a few pieces.
Commiserations to the Boston Celtics, and hopefully next year will be a better year for them. But we now move on to the finals. Denver Nuggets against the Miami Heat. And the betting lines have already come out in the United States. The Denver Nuggets are favorites going to this one. The most likely scenario, according to Vegas, is that it would be Denver in 5. You take a look at those odds, you take a look at those numbers, Charles. Where do you fall with regards to Miami Heat against the Denver Nuggets? Denver favored, Miami always ignores the odds.
Well, I mean, for them to be at this point, they basically were the underdogs in every series they've been in. And for them to find a way to win, I mean, they're playing without Tyler Hero, man. I mean, he's a big piece of their team. They have a much shorter rotation, and they were counted out basically even before making the postseason, right? But I wouldn't put it past them to win the championship, but my gut tells me Denver's going to find a way to win. It's their year right now. They're a well-oiled machine offensively. They will have too many weapons. I think Jokic will be able to somehow figure out how to bust that zone that the Heat's been doing. And the guys are all clicking from the outside. I mean, the only thing is maybe they've had a long layoff. If Miami can find a way to steal Game 1, and maybe it could change the whole series. But other than that, I think Denver, I mean, it might be their time.
Denver in
5 or 6.
Okay. All right. No, he said 5 first, so we're going with that. Charles, really appreciate you. Hopefully we can have you here more often.
I'd love to. Thank you for having me.